I want to talk to you about a collaborative workflow. Now, Jcb, like any other Joomla component, can function in a shared environment quite easily, where you have one website or one system that is online, and people can log in and they can edit documents, let's say components. They can click on a component, and while they are working on that component, no one else can, because it will in effect lock the component out to them. So if we open that list view again, you see that it's checked out. And so this functionality is available in Jcb already. So whether it's an admin view, whether it's a field, if you log in and someone else opens it up, it checks out the item, and so people can work together quite easily in a shared environment where they have one Jcb but multiple users. More than that, it also has a very strong permissional structure, which if you open the component builder permissional area, you'll see that it has quite a long list, I suppose longer than one might anticipate, but it's a huge list of permissions. And that means you can have different groups in your Joomla groups in regarding to these that have access and is allowed to work on only certain areas, and so your possibilities of setting up a development workflow with Jcb in one Joomla website is endless. And that was the whole idea. The idea was to make Jcb a place where you could have teams work together in Joomla developing components. So this is the one that's worked from day one, this approach, and it is very powerful, and I've already been told by quite a number of developers that they are using that. They've got teams working together on components, and it is excellent. So I'm happy to see that working. But like we all know, Jcb's most desirable environment is an offline environment, where you do development in your own local developing environment, where you maybe have a virtual machine running and you can do Docker deployments or something like that, when you run Joomla and you're safe within your own network. And when you do that, the collaborative concept of working together with other developers sort of doesn't come to its right, and that's what I've been working on. And the whole idea of the Jcb packages was birthed out of this need. The need to collaborate with others around a specific component. So we've also started working on an area called servers, in which we now have actually added this option of SFTP, which is a really smart protocol, and it's purely PHP, so it will function in moving, at the moment, only moving zip files and things around. But the idea would be in the long run that we could possibly create connections between different Jcbs, which could automatically synchronize things like almost like they're on the same system. But okay, I did have a thread open on that on GitHub, connecting Jcbs with each other to sync development on agreed projects. That was the issue that I opened up, issue 233, and then there was basically a discussion between me and one of my co-workers and then some other from the community, which ended up in saying that this is a premium feature, and although we have sort of put it on the back burner, like you see me say here, I'm still very much thinking about taking this and making this a reality. And so part of doing that is taking a specific area of Jcb, and that area is the import of Jcb packages. And to improve this area so considerably that we basically, the synchronization will be nothing else but a JCB package traveling from one to the other and updating each other automatically. And so to achieve that, I started working on a feature which now is available in the latest version 2.79, development method, right? That's the one. And what we've called it is the default is the way that it's always worked. And then there's this expansion. There's a tutorial about this, which really explains that you can select specific components that you've developed, and then on the frequency of this cron job, it will actually build and install this project automatically. So that is the first step of needing to sort of make that connection between two projects possible. Now projects, I'm literally talking about different Joomla websites, right? One being offline, one being online, and then this one that's online to serve like a hub, and then everybody that's offline would be pushing their changes to this online and pulling again from it. So that is the long-term aim. So those of you listening, that you'd realize where I'm heading. I'm trying to get to the point where I can have a team of developers all having their offline environments, doing development on the same project, and as they feel they have achieved a certain level of stability in the project in a certain area, they can make literally a pull request to the online environment where JCB is running, and then others can review those changes, and maybe that component can come in as a clone, and they can play around with it until they feel, yeah, this is good enough, and then it can be merged into the main branch somehow. So it's somehow putting Git in a sort of an interface, and then obviously at some point I became so overwhelmed with the task that I started doing all these other little things that you now see coming about. One of them being that I added a VDM package area, which basically takes all the packages that we have available online and puts it right here, easy to sort of get hold of it. And so there are some free ones between them at the moment, like this demo package here. All of the packages that are actually available on GitHub, the actual Joomla component of this package will have this source code link showing up, so that you can actually go look. If you let's say you select which one, question and answers, then there's actually a source code area where you can go look on GitHub to this program, and you can actually take it and install it on a Joomla website to see its functionality and to see its features. And if you then that's how you can evaluate the package easily. Basically it means that this JCB package produces this source code. That's really what it gets down to. So now today the current workflow model looks as follows. First, you need to realize there is the JCB mapped, is that 2P's there, mapped component, and then there is the Joomla component. This is the one that is sort of the fields, the views, the code, everything inside of JCB that can be moved between JCBs, being one on one website, one on another. So you can actually extract a package and give it to someone, and he can import it into his JCB, and this is what this is. Whereas the Joomla component is the produced package, which then when you compile that mapped component, it produces a Joomla component. And these are two different things, although they are the same thing. Now, when I think about the workflow, then this is affecting this, but this cannot affect this. So you can change here, make changes to this package, and it produces a different result in this package. But if you make changes to this package, it does not immediately would make any difference to this package, unless you make use of what we have called custom code implementation, where you do editing within the IDE. then yes, then making changes to this package will affect this one. But that's a whole different story, and a little bit beyond what I want to explain here. So when I think about a workflow, then I would like to see that we make a change to this package. It gets validated by what we have here, and then everybody updates again this package to be the same as what we decided on here. Now that may not make sense, so let me add some arrows and demonstration to this. I'm going to use this question and answers package as an example. So if you were going to become a collaborator on the question and answers package, then you'd first need to go to the source code of it. So on GitHub, you would go and open the source code, and you will fork this source code, which would then give you the option of making changes to this, but not directly manually, but instead through Jcb. Now that means that you will then clone this repository that you have forked down to your local development environment, and doing it as follow. So first thing you then do is you go back to your component where it's installed on your local developing environment, and you open the options area so that you can set the folder path for your Git files. You're going to have a place where all your Git files, basically the component unzipped, is going to be placed automatically for you. So here you would add that. So I'm going to place it in my basically my user folder, and I'm going to create a folder they call Joomla. I have to do this manually, and then inside of that I'm going to add another folder called Git. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to save this, and then I'm quickly going to create those folders, and so I'll show it to you in the command line. Okay, I need to first add the company information here. Okay, and now save and close. Ooh, it's got another one to choose. This is just the language. Make sure to put it to British at this stage. That is the best practice. And oh yes, another thing, I don't want to have any prefix at this stage. And yes, save and close. Okay, now we've got our Git path set up. Now I need to actually create those files in my local developing environment, so I'll do that via command line. So first I'll make a directory, then I'm going to change to that directory. Now in that directory I'm going to create another directory called Git, and change to that directory as well. So this is the directory wherein my components are going to be placed. Now at the moment, if we look inside of this directory, there is really nothing showing. But the first time I compile a component and I say to the compiler to add my files to the Git repository, it is going to create a folder with all the code inside it automatically. So you remember that I cloned this repository on GitHub, Joomla questions and answers. Now to continue, I need to get the Jcb package for this installed into my Jcb program. The way this is done, obviously, is we go to the Jcb package area and we select the questions and answers package, and we get the package. Then we add the key, and we, at the moment there is not really any components on this install, so it's fine to leave this to yes. I'm going to also force local update of anything, and so we can just check again that it is the right package. Yes, it's the correct package. And the checksum, you can read this. Basically there's a checksum for the package, and at the moment it seems that everything is fine. You can make a final check of just clicking this link and make sure that this number is the same as the one seen on the page here, and yes it is, so all is good. And then we click continue, and there you have it. We've got the component in our system. Now this component, now if I compile it for the first time, let's again just for your sake, let me show you that there still is no file here whatsoever. Okay, now I'm going to compile this component, and I'm going to say add to repository folder. Okay, so this should the component be moved to your local repository folder. Now we already set the path for this, so now it will work. If we add say yes and then compile this, we see that it's actually been done and it's all well. And we now go back to that folder and we check again. We see that now there is a folder with that exact name. So if we change into that folder, we'll see that it is at the moment LSLA. There is no Git information here. So this folder is basically just the source code without any Git connected to it. So what we're going to do now, at this point, we are going to connect your forked version that you have on GitHub to this folders here, and that from now on, if you make a change to the component, it will be, you'll have to push the changes in this folder to the GitHub repository. The way to make this the GitHub or link the two to each other is to use the following commands. Making sure that you're in the correct directory, com-questions -answers -Joomla-3, you can run the command rm-f R**. Now I know you might say, why did we compile it and now delete everything? Well, unfortunately, that is the only way to do this without difficulty. You first need to get the information down from GitHub, and then you might ask, why didn't we just do that first? And that was because it seemed easier to just let Jcb build the folder for you, and then you use the folder. And so I'm gonna just wipe out all the files. If we check there now, there's basically no file left. Then we're going to start by actually pulling the files down from GitHub. The first is to say git init, then to actually add the remote branch. And to get the remote branch's URL, you'll type out git remote add origin, and then go to GitHub where you forked the branch. So, and then here you'd get the URL, just copying it here. You can either use the HTTPS or the SSH, which in my case is what I prefer. So you paste it in there and click to save it. If you now were to check the config information, you'll see that this remote branch has been added. Now the next thing to do is to pull down the master branch. This is done with git pull origin master. This will now get all the information from GitHub, which basically is the same as what you have here behind my command line screen. So if we were now going to do ls la, we'll see that there is actually the files all back as they should be. But now we have git here as well, and my command line shows us that we have a git repository and we are on the master branch. Okay, so that was to get us linked to this repository. Now we can go and compile it again. At the moment, if we do git status, it should say that everything is fine and clean and there is no difference between these two. But the moment we now do another compile, it's going to change the files, obviously. So now if we do git status, we'll see that all these files were modified. And we can check to see what is it that was modified by doing git diff. And we'll see mostly, okay, it added more lines. The compiled version was the 24th of April, and now it's the 5th of May. Okay, scroll down. Okay, so it okay, here's another one that changed. Okay, so there's some XML that changed. Oh yes, and we made an improvement to the JSON to string in JCB, so it's also updated those functions. And we removed the abbreviative, prefix to the name, so that's been updated. So you can look through the div to see all the changes that has been made. The reason why the XML file format is changed is because we are using different XML compiler here. And I can show you that in a moment, just that you might understand. Okay, hold on. Here in the global options, there is two ways to compile the XML in JCB. It's really about, well, the reason why there are two ways is because some servers don't support this one, this simple XML option. It doesn't support it, and mostly because it doesn't have all the PHP models or things, applications activated. So what we then have is a string manipulation option, which basically doesn't use the simple XML, but does actually still replace most of the time, building all these XML fields string by string. This one is how JCB started, and it's most certainly working very well. So I like using it, but it's not necessarily the best option. It's faster. So if we compile it again now, we will most probably see less changes to the XML, because I remember that package actually did have, it did use the string manipulation option. So to exit this, you just press Q, and then again to go back in, and let's see what changed now. Dates. And yeah, there's much less. In fact, I don't see any XML changes now. Okay, so basically it's just the date that is changed, and it's talking about the build date. Now this is something we might need to look at, because the reason why it's changed is because we imported it, and so your application thinks the build only started today. Wait a minute, no, 24th of April. Yeah, time's flying, that's all. I realized that date is actually correct. Okay, so here we have all the changes. It's really primarily just the build date, and then a little bit here and there where JCB itself has improved. So it's improved with this variable here, determines that it's an external value. That's with the JSON string. Remember I said to you, we've done a little improvement there. So it's really just actually reflecting the JCB improvements, which is really the way it should be. Okay, so that means if you now were going to make a pull request, we most probably will say thank you, because you're basically just updating the JCB improvements to the component. Okay, so let's show you how that will work. You would now make a commit, which should look something like this. And remember, I always show you the simple, easy way to do it. There are more precise, better maybe, but more difficult ways. So, update the component with improvements made to JCB. And we click that. Obviously, you sign your commit and git push. So at this point, you have made a change to the component via your JCB install, and you're pushing it back to your forked version of this component's Joomla component, which is on GitHub. Now that means that if you refresh this page now, it will say that it's one commit ahead. Now, I think at this point we need to discuss how many changes should you make before you make a pull request. And if 5, 6, 7 people make the same changes regarding implementing Joomla's JCB's improvements, whose do we accept, and yeah, all those kind of things I suppose will still be ironed out as we go. But at this point you could click make pull request and it will automatically take the components and show that it can be merged, and you click on that make pull request, and your comment should usually end up here in the title area. We will, for every package that we manage, we'll eventually add a pull request template with instructions and how to manage it from here further. And at this point you're actually saying, I've made changes to the JCB program, package, whatever you want to call it, and these are the changes I've made, test it, and please let me know if you like what I've done. And there will be discussions here, and please do not be discouraged if it doesn't go, quickly. There are obviously reasons for us to always go through things quite slowly and thoroughly. I know in our own in-house developing team, things are going quite fast at this point because we have sort of come to a place of understanding each other's perspective, so it goes quickly. But working with strangers and people we don't know is obviously going to be more difficult and slower. You won't have the option of editing all these values like I do, because I actually own this repository, but you most probably will be able to come up to here and actually put in the necessary information that we'll ask for, and then click here create pull request. So at this point, if I did that, it will create a pull request and the developers will be notified, and we'll start communicating from here. Now when this pull request with your changes have been fully accepted, and obviously you haven't made further changes to this component, then the next part of the process needs to happen. So if I can illustrate what has happened so far, you first forked the component, then you imported that component's Jcb package, then you made changes. In this case we didn't make changes, but you could have added a new field or a new view. Then you compiled it. Then in your local development you committed the changes to the Git repository. So here is also linked and commit the changes to Git. Then you push the changes to the forked version, and then you made a pull request. And now the next step. And this is the place where the Jcb Package Manager is going to really come into play, because now you want to contribute these changes not only to the actual Joomla component, which already has now been, this pull request is contributing it to this area of the component. When this has been finalized, the next step is to also contribute it to the JCB mapped component. And this one is crucial, because then everybody who's helping to develop the mapped component gets this update via Jcb Package Manager. And okay, so we're going to now demonstrate the next step. So let's say at this point your commit has been accepted and merged into the root master branch of the repository. Then it should look like this. It will say merged, and if we were going to look at this here, it says now update the component with the improved maintenance JCB. Okay, so really that was the point at which the next step must take place. Only once the changes you've made has been accepted in the Joomla component source of the project. Now the next step is to do that with the Jcb package as well. Now all VDM's Jcb packages are kept in the Jcb Packages repository. So the next thing you need to do is you need to fork this repository. Now I already forked this repository a few days ago, but you'll see that it's already 4 commits behind the master branch. Now I can't really do anything until I get in sync again with this master branch. Making any commits now will mess things up, and so the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this repository is in sync with the master branch. So obviously I'll need it to be the repository needs to be cloned down to my local system. Those of you that have quite a number of repositories and keeping them all in sync is a pain, we have this little shell script, update forks, which is very useful. Even if you're not going to run the shell script itself, you can at least sort of peek at some of the commands and how to get this done. The way this does at the moment, what it does is it runs, gets all the repositories that you have forked, and then it also updates them. So there are a number of SSH files here that you should have a look at. I'm just going to open this update repositories. Well, now that I've got the file open here, I realize, okay, this is not going to work unless you're able to understand Bash. You're most probably not going to actually be able to follow this. So let me rather do the commands one at a time inside of that repo. But at least you know that there is a package here, and if you do know Bash, then this is most certainly something to try out. It's working very well. I'm using it quite a lot, and it's keeping all my forked repositories up to date and in sync with the master branch, so that if I work with them, that it already is ready and I'm able to just jump in and do it. But it's not that hard to do it manually anyway, so let's do that. If you haven't cloned down the repository to your local developing environment, then you need to do that first. Nothing of what I'm going to show you now will work unless you've done that. There are a few documentations that GitHub has that helps with this quite a lot. So if you're on Windows or on Mac or on Linux, you can actually go to these URLs, or just type in Google update my fork repo and do a search, and then look for the one which sort of, this is the place you want to end up at. And then it's going to tell you that you must first configure your repo to actually see the remote upstream. So click on that and do this first, and then we'll come back to this one. So first we do is we're going to just check out in our repo what is the remote branches. And so we see that it only has this 2 remote branches, and it fetch and pulls from those. Now we want to add the remote branch, which is the upstream branch, and we're going to use this one and add the original owner. So this one is your name, this one must be the original owner's name and the original repository's name. So those 2 values you need to update. The way to get them is go back to your repo and just click on this value here. This should take you to that original branch, and then you can just get it by copying this value here. So then you'll type remote add upstream like it says there on GitHub, and you will Control Shift V to paste in command line, or those of you can also paste with the mouse. And so there is the repository. I have a little change to my SSH, which means I use a VDM to identify the server name. That is something most of you wouldn't need to do, and we'll click enter. Okay, so now if we do that remote branch, we'll now see that there are 2 remote branches, 2 branches that are remote, and one is the origin and one is the upstream. And that now is time for the next step, which is to sync the fork. So first what we'll do is we'll fetch the upstream. This will basically fetch the files that has changed from the upstream, which at this stage we know is the main master branch. Then, just to make sure that you are on the master branch, we are going to say git checkout master to make sure you are on the master branch. Next, we are going to merge the upstream branch into your master branch. Now this will look differently depending on what happened, but it will give you a bunch of information, and then this branch is now basically, the local branch is now in sync with the master branch, upstream master branch. Now to get this to also update your branch on GitHub, you'll just need to do git push, and this will push the changes back to Git. Now there are many things that can actually go wrong or sort of work out different in Git, and so I'm not here to teach you how to use Git. If you run into some gray areas or difficult issues, you'll need to Google and figure out how to get this done. This is just sort of illustrating the proposed workflow of developing components in JCB while collaborating with the greater community around a JCB package. Those of you that have watched the tutorial on how to contribute to the community directory of JCB packages, then much of what I'm going to be explaining further is already covered in that previous tutorial. And so we're almost finished with this circle. We've started by forking the Joomla component and importing the JCB package, then making changes to that, and then compiled it and pushed those changes to the Joomla repo. And when those changes were accepted into that repo, we now went to the place where we found the JCB package, which in VDM's case is the VDM package area, where if it was a community component, then you would follow the explanation given to you in that previous tutorial. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're basically going to export the JCB package, add it to these packages that we have here, and run our hash. So if we look at this ls.la, we've got a hash SA file here that if we run it now, there should be no changes to the repo, and just as we expected, nothing changed. So everything is up to date at the moment. And so the only file we are going to change is basically these three files here, because we are going to update this package by exporting it from JCB with the changes we've made. Now, since you've contributed those changes to this question and answers Joomla component repository, those who are going to validate this push, which we're about to make, are going to go back to that repository and make sure that you're not changing things other than which you contributed there. In fact, at some point, my anticipation is to actually build a bot which would validate this for us. So at this stage, it will still be a little bit manual, so it'll be slow, but eventually we'll speed it up and the validation will happen faster and more efficient. So here in JCB, we now basically click on questions and answers, and there is one little snag here which I realize I haven't actually resolved it, and that is that you now need to actually have the same key for this package set in the admin, or rather in the component, as the one that the developer uses. And that can only be given to you by the original owner of this package, which in this case is myself. And what does that mean? It means that this export key must be the same one as the one that the package was compiled with originally. Now, if you have imported this and you see a key here, you can be 100% sure it is not the same key. Because this is an encrypted field, you are basically just seeing the encrypted value, not the actual key. The actual key was never exported unencrypted. It always remains encrypted, and that's why we have the encrypted fields all around JCB, It's not because we think it's going to make the database more secure necessarily, but it's because when we export and move data around, that which is secret stays secret, and only within that specific component developing environment are those keys unique. So the way you get this is you need to communicate with that developer and actually ask him permission whether you can extend on this package, and then he needs to manually give you this key. And so since I can ask that from for myself, I'm going to just add that key here to be sure that it is the same key with which it originally was compiled with. Okay, so now we've got those keys to be the same, and it's sort of the way to tell everyone that you and that other developer are in agreement that this, in fact, it possibly could happen that once your pull request to the to the Joomla components repo has been merged and accepted, then that team needs to give you the key. That's how I think it will work. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be cemented or is going to change, but you do realize that trust and collaboration goes hand in hand. So they need to give you the key. If it's not a Jcb package that actually requires a key, then it's a different story, and yet the same sort of procedure will apply, except the exchange of keys won't be necessary. But now that we've got the key in place, we basically will click here and export the Jcb package. So we now have this package here in this folder, and we now need to move it into the repository, which is also obviously the one we have now synchronized with our forked version. So I have it here. I'm going to copy it. I'm actually going to let's cut it from my temporal folder in my Joomla website to this repository, paste it in, and it's going to ask if it should replace, and we're going to say yes, replace it. And there we go. We've got the package updated. Now, if we go back to command line and we do git diff, we'll see that that file has changed. Now, we also need to run this this hash file to update the, and now git status, we'll see that those files have updated. So you would possibly, I'm not sure what would be our convention, but I think your pull request to the Joomla repository of this component, the ID of that could possibly be useful here. It's just to sort of give a heads up and validate that you did first contribute the code to the actual Joomla component and it was accepted, and now this is the change to the package, which also now needs to be looked at. So in our case, this is the pull request URL. I think we're just going to use that in our commit message and use the same commit message. So it should look something like this. Update the component with the improvements made in Jcb, and maybe say ref, and then the repository's username or organization name, the repository name with this #1, since the pull request was number 1. Okay, that would do, and then we'll submit that. And now we push those changes to our version of the repository. Going back to GitHub then, after the push has been submitted, and if you look at this commit, you see it actually has a link, and this link is to that issue on GitHub. So it will be easy for us to trace where you have contributed it to the actual Joomla component and why it all happened, being the same comment message. Now at this stage, you again would make a pull request to the master branch where we will basically review the changes. Now again, at this stage we don't have pull request templates and everything in place, but as soon as they do get to be placed there, then please follow those instructions. We'll try to be as thorough as we can, but obviously being a community is always up for discussion, and we will try and do this the right way. At the moment we could put the ref in the description, and then just again the comment in the title. If it's a long comment, then just put maybe a summary here, a short one, and put the wrong comment back in here. Okay, and then you basically create the pull request. At this point, discussion will begin, validating to see that you followed all the procedures and that this package is stable and ready to become part of the actual repo. And then once accepted, it will be merged into the master branch and become available to the rest of the community. So that's at the moment illustration of what I consider a collaborative workflow in JCB. So we were at next step, and we had to move to JCB, where they have now accepted and merged the changes you made to the Joomla component. And now the owner has given you the original key because they trust the changes you've made. And you now fork the Jcb package repository. Make sure you have it in sync if it's an old fork. Then update the key with the key from the owner. Then export the Jcb package. Add it to the local repo with the commit message and the reference as illustrated. Then push the change to your forked repo and make a pull request. So here is the workflow. This could become nicely documented. I suppose someone can take that upon them to even make some nice chart. I'm maybe not the correct guy for the job, and this might expand and become maybe much more advanced, or it could be made more simple. But in a nutshell, just below an hour, we're at 47 minutes sort of. This is the explanation of the collaborative workflow with external partners around a Jcb package. Once this pull request gets merged, we are basically back at that this is in sync and this is in sync. And this will continue, and I'll go on and on. And obviously others will contribute, so there are some other complexities also in this process. But that is sort of what I can see happening. I know that when you pull the changes from a previous package, you know, this, where is it? You know, the import the Jcb package, there's the option to import it as a clone or to import it with a merge. Now, the idea would be that you will only import and merge your Jcb package with the global repo as they accept these pull requests, and so that you would always stay in sync with what actually is currently the community version of the package. And you could import it as a clone and make changes to the clone and affect that will not affect the main master version, but this all is a trial and error process which you would sort of teach yourself how that works. And so my idea is to do that within a blank install, try it out, pull in some of the free versions, play around with it until you become confident, and then you're able to also start contributing to not only the community packages but also VDM packages to which you've got access, and so help improve those components for everyone. Well, thanks for watching. I hope this is insightful, and I'm sure there might be things that some of you were not able to follow, and I would encourage you to just Google that and do some tutorials, and then I'm sure you'll manage. Okay, thanks for watching.